Hi everyone, I'm Zan and welcome to your weekly energy update, a general tarot guidance taking a look at how the energies of this week are likely to influence our lives and emotional states, both individually and collectively, and also it has an included divine guidance and things to be careful with. Now, even before looking at the cards, I can already tell that all of this week we're going to be under the really heavy emotional, psychological, spiritual, and sometimes even metaphysical influence of this super full moon taking place either today or tomorrow, depending on which side of the world you're on. And in Western tropical astrology, it's in the sign of Scorpio, so it is really not an easy or pleasant energy, but it is that of the truth. But even if you don't use or don't believe in the tropical system, it is still a super full moon in the sky, regardless of the symbolism. So that means the power of the moon pulls the emotions to the surface. And a super full moon means that the moon is that much closer to the earth, so the effects are that more intense. So basically this is a really special time, regardless of what spiritual path we follow. Even those spiritual paths which have absolutely nothing to do with astrology, a full moon is still a full moon, so it is extremely powerful and tense. Now let's get into the reading. The cards that depict the overall energies of this week are the Five of Wands, the Ten of Cups reversed, and the Two of Swords. So even without going into the detail, into the depth of this energy, we can already tell that it's gonna be really frustrating. It's going to be really conflictual. We might find ourselves triggered by so very many things. A word someone says, a criticism, a comment that we see online, a reaction of someone, or basically maybe the lack of reaction, ignorance. We may feel a lot of challenges in our personal relationships, in friendships, partnerships of any kind, even at work, even with people who are truly close to us, like family, like relatives. And this Five of Wands also means turbulence, problems, strife on the world stage, the sense of imminent danger, the sense of really strong restlessness, not being able to trust anyone or anything. And another expression of this is like very strong survival mode, regardless of who it is that we are or in which situations we find ourselves in. Since this is such a very powerful time energetically, we might not really be able to control our reactions, what we speak, what we express, even certain choices and decisions that much more. They're really going to be instinctual. But there is one thing that we have to control, and it is not really a choice or an option. This is where, even without knowing, even without realizing, we may become aggressors, we may become bullies, we may really hurt other people, especially our closest friends, relatives, family, and of course even total strangers, by a very passive aggressive attitude, where all it takes is a small trigger like be honest or tell me truly how you feel, and this might be enough for us to unleash an emotional tsunami at whoever is asking. So we really have to be careful not to leave our own toxicity, our own negative imprints, our own aggression, even if that is just emotional, psychological, even if it's self-defense on other people. Neither should we repress anything, of course. So the best advice in this case is to truly think things through before we speak or before we react, and let's try our hardest not to allow ourselves to get into really tensioned, complicated, emotionally heated situations. Let's try our very hardest to avoid these, especially if these are not truly necessary, like online discussions, comments, sharing opinions, etc. Of course, there is going to be a part of this energy which is fated, which is karmic, and those situations we simply cannot avoid. Because this Ten of Cups reverse represents revelations, very powerful revelations. They may be inner epiphanies, for example, thinking back of the past and realizing something maybe quite subjective or emotional or karmic in nature. Like, let me just give you an example. There was a situation in the past where you always thought that you were wrong or you made a mistake, you were unfair, you were selfish, etc. And now all of a sudden you remember, you think back, and you have a different kind of mindset, and you just realize that it was quite the opposite. You were never wrong, you were just made to feel guilty or whatever, and that might be a really, really strong release. It might be a really strong purging. So even though this energy is intense, it can truly take crosses, it can take boulders off our souls. And of course, it can play out the opposite way, where maybe there was this conflict, this divorce, this really bad relationship, where you always accuse the other one of hurting you, being unfair, doing this or that, and all of a sudden you just think back, and because you have a different mindset, because you have a different vision of your own persona, an added maturity and life experience, you might realize that yes, all of that is true. You were hurt or you were the victim of something, but you weren't the very best example either. Either maybe you kind of put yourself in that situation, or you allowed too much, or maybe you wished something and the universe delivered that wish to you in a very unusual manner. You know, this is where we attract certain people in our lives for a very specific reason. But ultimately, even if you find the fault in your own behavior, in your choices, in whatever you have done in the past, it is still as liberating, it is still as basically refreshing, because you can find it that much easier to forgive that other person and also yourself, and just shut all doors to the past and not dwell on it ever again. It is exactly those realizations and epiphanies when we reach the conclusion that everyone was a little bit guilty their own way. It is that much easier to accept, forgive, and release, because ultimately human beings, people make mistakes, and that is inevitable. So the Ten of Cups reversed can represent the sensation of finally being able to accept certain things from the past, especially those which have to do with relationship, with emotions, connections, friendships. This is like a profound emotional purification where you can truly and, quite literally release whatever was in the past, but not the usual dramatic way where we think, where we dwell on it, we cry, etc. But we may find it quite easy, quite surprisingly effortless, because it might be like a inner reaction, almost like an instinctual impulse, where we just eject it, where we, excuse my expression, vomit it out, and there it's gone. And this Ten of Cups energy favors especially those people who had a lot of problems with their families, with their parents, with their childhood traumas, being bullied at school when they were little. Also those who lost someone very important in their lives at an early age. And this Two of Swords represents this sense of calm, this sense of peace. And of course, it is also a void that is left in our souls, in our hearts, in our emotional world. This feeling of emptiness, especially towards the end of the week, when the emotional intensity of the full moon starts waning, this sense of void and emptiness is going to be quite empowering, because it will be like a magnetism that, okay, all of that happened and I released it, but I feel so empty. But that emptiness means that I'm ready for something new, for something much, much better, something authentic. I'm ready to live life. Now, yet another way this energy can play out, especially for those people who will have it extremely karmic. Well, it might not just be the emotional release, etc. Maybe that person from the past, or whatever that emotional situation represented, might return in your life as an apology, as someone trying to reinitiate the relationship, not in the same way, of course. Maybe that person, people, regardless of who it is, friends, family, or whatever, has a totally different emotional state and would just like to set things straight with you. So some people might get messages from exes, from old best friends, or from people who hurt them, etc. Because those people will feel the need to release the guilt in this sense. And this Two of Swords doesn't necessarily mean forgiveness and that everything is gonna be okay or the relationship is gonna be resumed, but it means that everyone, one way or another, who is involved in this is gonna have their peace, their own truth, and the strength and wisdom to move on. And even if some might choose to resume that relationship, well, naturally it will never ever be the same again, but that might not necessarily be a bad thing. And yet another expression of this energy, now this might not have to do with anything negative from the past, but quite the contrary. Perhaps you had an old childhood friend and life separated you and you didn't even have the chance to say goodbye, or there was someone very special in your life and you always felt a certain kind of regret that you didn't take things further, or you didn't react to like an invitation or whatever when the time was there. So something unfinished might return from the past, and it might even be something truly positive. This is where the universe might give you a second chance. Now, of course, if we remove this layer of karma, if we remove this fated nuance, if we just look at things from a very down-to-earth perspective, well, this Five of Wands is not necessarily the most comfortable energy, because it does mean challenges in partnerships, in relationship, in marriages. This is where one person wants one thing or to take things into a certain direction, and the other person has totally different interests. And there might be a moment of confrontation, a moment of truth. But how this plays out really depends on us, because this can turn into a heated argument with angry words being said. The Ten of Cups reversed, really, really disrupting the peace, the harmony of the relationship. But it can also turn into the Two of Swords, diplomacy, finding the common ground, the middle path where everyone gets something that they want and they also make a compromise. But of course this takes a lot of wisdom, and this takes a lot of self-control not to allow that Five of Wands, as in fighting for your want, your will, for your desires, to be excessive and aggressive. Or in the partnership that you have, you are the one who usually makes the compromise and allows the other person to have their will. Well, this is where you have to stand up for yourself and set the limits. But as I said, the best way to go about this is diplomacy, calm, peace, and not to get into heated arguments. And the Ten of Cups reversed, not to stir up the past, the mistakes, etc. Just live the present. Another really positive side of this energy is the Ten of Cups sometimes represents your household, especially if it's a shared accommodation. For example, you live with your parents, or you have housemates, or you share the rent, etc. Well, this Five of Wands may mean your desire for independence, which can be extremely intense at this time. It can really, really turn into frustration. And this is also where you have to be extremely wise, because of course you desire this and of course you're working on this, but that Two of Swords suggests don't make hasty decisions. Do things slowly, rationally, logically, by the book. Don't take unnecessary risks, because even if you might very quickly get what you want, as in to be independent, move away, leave the shared accommodation, leave the family home, etc., well, your new life, symbolically speaking, might turn into a massive struggle. So really, really think about it. Really think about all the benefits you gain from sharing certain things with your family or housemates, etc. Because the want and desire is one thing, but being truly ready, for example, materially or emotionally, is a totally different thing. Because let's say even if you might have the money, the means, the possibility, or even if your family says, well, we'll help you, we'll support you, no problem at all, well, you might be feeling alone. You might not be very okay with the solitude side. So really examine your emotions and feelings and basically the totality of your situation if you're truly ready to make this step. Like, let me just give you an example. Let's say your family, or you manage to move, you manage to leave the household, and because you don't really want to feel alone or lonely, especially under these very turbulent change of times, you might have your own space and freedom, but you might be, speaking on the phone or on social media or, any platform with your friends and family 24/7. So is that truly such a big change? So basically just weigh the pros and cons of the timing of this situation. And if you genuinely feel that the time is now, the time is here, it is like a dream come true, and you have everything you need, of course, then of course go for it. But if you feel like it would be much wiser to delay or wait a little bit, or simply surrender it to the universe, even if there are so many things that might annoy you, even if there are so very many things that really take away your comfort or your sense of freedom, perhaps you can tolerate it just a little bit longer when the situation is much more favorable. For example, even if we just look at the global situation. And last but not least, those people who kind of will get the most extreme end of this energy, because that Two of Swords can represent, seeing things only as black and white. And if this happens in a marriage, in a relationship, in a work relationship, or any kind of relationship where there is a codependency, this energy really advises not to make choices or decisions out of anger, because the feelings might change so very much 180 degrees as we head into the summer. Perhaps a marriage which seems irreparable right now, or a work relation, how pleased you are with your job, with your routines, or how your bosses or colleagues are treating you, etc. Even if it may feel so very bad right now, or that there is no hope, or it's futile, or whatever, this can change very much as we head into the summer, especially for those of you for whom the situation is not long term, as in it hasn't been going on for years and years now, but it is something which is rather fresh or new. So give it another chance or at least a second thought. But if it's something very long term, as in it's been going on for years and years, and you have this chance to make a move, then absolutely stand up for yourself and follow your feelings, because if it hasn't changed in years, chances are it's not gonna change for the better in the months to come. Now, if you look at this energy collectively, globally speaking, well, there is going to be a lot of tension on the world stage. This Five of Wands can represent military action, but of course I don't mean a war, but more of a psychological war, so to speak, like nations, big power players on the world stage threatening each other. This Ten of Cups reverse represents more the illusion of war than the war itself. So it is threats, it is tactical moves, it is a certain kind of stubbornness, and this Two of Swords, the reconfiguration of certain diplomatic relationships, the termination of some, or new alliances being born. It is almost like these big nations who have all the power in the world will just play with each other, play mind games, if this makes sense from a collective perspective. And for them it is what it is, just a game, just a chess session. But for the people it might turn into fear, it might turn into paranoia. So there is gonna be a lot of fear energy in the world. And also this Five of Wands can represent desperate gestures, for example, like an act of violence, terrorism, religious fanaticism from certain criminal groups, etc. But ultimately, the conclusion, this Two of Swords, is negotiations, legal cases, talks, discussions. This is where, with this global situation, the leaders or the important members of governments are going to be negotiating and trying basically to find a solution that pleases everyone, even if it's just a big improvisation. As in, just look at the Two of Swords, pulling wool over the eyes, either of each other or them against the people, or it can even represent that certain countries, certain nations, in a very shocking, unexpected and surprising way, go against the recommendations of like the World Health Organization, or rebel against being forced to do or act in a certain way by the allied groups that they are part of, for example, the European Union. But I really don't want to get into politics and all of that, because that really shouldn't be what spirituality, tarot, and divine guidance is about. The only reason I'm mentioning these things is for you not to fear when things get confusing and chaotic and fear might take over. Now for the divine guidance section, we have the Two of Cups reversed and the Ten of Wands reversed. And this is such a beautiful energy, because this means a change in relationships, especially romantic relationship, partnerships, or very, very close friendships, soulmate connections. But, that doesn't mean that you have to be romantically involved with the soulmate. It can be the same sex, as in your best friend or anything like that. But the Ten of Wands reverse is release, ease. It means a karmic completion. It also means truth, clarity, and emotional empowerment. So basically, if there was something in the past with a lover, a partner that you felt fated and it didn't work out, well, either you're gonna reach clarity, understanding, forgiveness, or basically a massive stone is gonna drop off your heart. Or if you felt a certain kind of disharmony with your current partner or in the relationship that you are now, something is gonna happen that's gonna change everything, and whatever worries, concerns, and burdens you will be washed away by these scorpionic waters, so to speak. But at the same time, it can also mean secrets being revealed. For example, infidelity or something that someone did in a partnership, like a betrayal. And in that case, the Ten of Wands is going to make everything so very easy. The secret is out. The gesture itself is, I'm not saying unforgivable, but it would be totally irrational to continue the relationship like that. So something falls off. It is like a stone or the cross being taken off you. It means release, it means freedom, it means clear waters, reaching conclusions. And naturally, whatever this is, it will turn into strength, it will turn into a lot of psychological empowerment. The reason why all of this is at the divine guidance section is because this is basically divine guidance being active in your life. It might have been something that you asked for, clarity or the truth, or to be able to look at the deeper meaning of something that has been going on in your relationship, and the divine is gonna execute it. The divine is gonna work actively in order to guide you there. And this is like a very quick and instantaneous, spontaneous energy. So pay close attention, because the divine is gonna guide you to the truth that you have asked for or prayed for. And that truth is gonna take the cross or the stone off of your heart. Now, a totally different expression of this energy might not have to do with you personally, but it has a lot to do with divine guidance. For example, if you have a loved one in your life, family member, or your best friend, or your soulmate who you're not romantically connected to, and they've been suffering, or they've been in the dark night of the soul, or they have been searching for love quite some time now, and you felt so very sad for them because you knew that they were suffering. It is someone who is very, very close to your heart, and you have been praying for them. You have been asking the universe to do something in their favor. Well then, you're gonna receive good news, perhaps totally unexpectedly, shockingly, that whatever you have prayed for, whatever you have asked the universe to do for this person you love dearly, is gonna, let's say, manifest or come together. And even though this Two of Cups represent that the completion of your spiritual aid is going to distance you from this person you love dearly a little bit, but this is the most joyful, this is the most happiest distancing, so to speak, because that person will be so well. That person will find happiness either in a relationship or something that they needed in their lives. It might not really be like love or emotional healing or whatever. It might be a job, for example. They might have been going through a tough illness. They might have had some kind of hardships in their lives, and that ends, that is over. The universe is gonna help with that. So whatever it is, this person is gonna either get out from that really doomy, gloomy state and just start living their lives again, or whatever they've been looking for, needing in their lives is gonna finally appear, and this will be like a massive stone falling off your heart. Now in the to be careful with section, what the universe advises against, we have the Two of Wands reversed and the Moon card. The Moon card is self-explanatory. It, without a shadow of a doubt, represents the karmic, fated, and divinely guided energies and effects of this full moon. So, simply said, the universe is telling us, this week the ball is not in our courts, the ball is in the universe's court, so that kind of means that it doesn't really depend on us what happens. And this Two of Wands reversed, this is a message where, we know what we desire, we know what we want. We made certain very, very important choices in the recent past, regardless of what nature those choices were. And maybe right now, maybe this week, we might not have a lot of dynamism, we might not have a lot of action, we might not have a lot of divine help with those choices that we already made. But the universe tells us that this isn't really a source of worry. We shouldn't really get into panic mode. This is where we should actually practice the prayer of serenity, change and do what we can, and surrender what we have absolutely no power over. And whenever we ask for something from the divine, that is wisdom to know the difference between the two situations. Because if we get really obsessed, if we get over ambitious with, the choices that we made, that yes, I made this choice, let's say last week, and now I have to work with it. I cannot change it anymore. It has to work. It has to go like clockwork. And things are a little bit stagnating, or there are some unexpected twists and turns of events which might require you to put your plans on hold for a while, or temporarily focus on something else. And especially if those choices that you've made in the recent past were on one hand divinely guided, so you kind of felt it deep within you that that is the right choice for you. And also it has to do with certain either emotional investments, like a promise you made to someone, or money you invested into something, or a choice you made in your career or work. That doesn't mean that you made the wrong choice, that you made the mistake, and the universe is turning its back on you, or it deceived you, or whatever. It just means that right now is a time when things are a little bit chaotic, so don't worry. You will still get what you asked for. You will still be successful on the path that you have chosen, the choices that you have made. Just be a little bit patient and ultimately trust, because the universe will not steer you wrong. So the worst thing that you can do is become obsessed with action, with overdoing it, with focusing and concentrating obsessively, way too ambitiously on whatever it is that you need to get working, to pick up speed, to produce something, to show signs of success, or your investments coming to fruition, or whatever. You must not allow your fears to get in your way. You have to trust this, because all those choices that you were divinely guided to make in the recent past were definitely not the wrong ones. And the universe can almost promise that your fears, the worst case scenarios, are definitely not gonna be part of the picture. They're not gonna be part of the future. Those are just rational thoughts ultimately, because it is a possibility. But this is where you have to give trust to your own rationality, the rationality of your soul and desires, and not the fears or anxiety that can influence your mind. Well, this concludes today's reading. I do hope that you enjoyed it and you found it useful. Thank you so much for all your support, all your lovely comments, all the likes and shares. If you'd like to support my channel, you can find the PayPal link in the description below. Thank you again for listening. Wish everyone a magical and profoundly transformative full moon. Until next time, bye for now.